Hey, business news with Will Edwards is happening right now. Will, after yesterday's huge fine for UBS, the bad news continues for bankers.
Yeah, and today's bad news for bankers is that three Swiss bankers, in fact, have been charged by the Manhattan prosecutor for allegedly hiding over $420 million in offshore accounts to keep them out of the hands of the taxman. Details are still scarce, and in fact, the bank that they work for, or the banks they work for, have not been named. But of course, them being Swiss bankers, it does rather come in the shadow of Wednesday's massive fine for UBS for that label setting scandal.
And the effects of that continue to unfold.
That's right. It was a 1.2 billion euro fine or around that. And that may not be the end of the story because two former UBS traders have now been charged. Of course, there are 3 arrests over the LIBOR setting scandal in the UK last week. Of course, let's just get a reminder that rate being affected. Basically, it is linked to mortgage prices, to personal loan prices, and the banks are able to set that to an extent themselves, and traders were able to influence it for their own benefit. Now, Britain's Financial Services Authority says more than 2,000 emails and other electronic forms of communication made reference to the setting illegally of this rate, implying that it was widely known and a very widespread practice. And Hong Kong has also announced an investigation into UBS in particular. Now, the man in charge of UBS, Sergio Ermotti, he's the man at the top. He's been in charge for less than a year. Let's take a look at some of the challenges that he faces.
It's a little over a year since Sergio Ermotti was officially appointed to what has been described as one of the least enviable jobs in banking. A 2.3 billion euro rogue trader scandal forced the previous CEO aside, and the company moved quickly to appoint him as replacement. A former head of investment banking at UniCredit, he only joined UBS 2 years ago, and many believe he's now facing some insurmountable challenges at the Swiss giant. UBS had already agreed to pay $1.5 billion to US, British and Swiss regulators following its role in manipulating the interbank lending rate, and it will now face additional fines for a fraudulent scheme run out of its Tokyo office.
The bank's conduct was simply astonishing. Hundreds of trillions of dollars in mortgages, student loans, credit card debt, financial derivatives, and other financial products worldwide are tied to LIBOR.
The US is also seeking the extradition of former UBS traders on criminal charges, with investigators uncovering emails offering bribes in return for the effective rigging of the price of money.
It certainly teaches us that there's no more important factor than a bank's reputation in a situation like this. Every employee should feel responsible, not only for his actions, but also the actions of his or her colleagues, to make sure everything runs as it should.
But a handful of individuals cannot be blamed for the grander woes of UBS, its financial losses in the downturn, redundancies and other misadventures. The markets are certain to monitor the actions of Sergio Ermotti closely as he tries to turn the bank's fortunes around.
Will we take a look at the markets?
Yeah, let's take a look at the US markets, how they closed in the previous session. And it wasn't a good ending, actually, for the US markets because of more worries over that fiscal cliff. The Obama administration said it's puzzling that Republicans haven't accepted his latest offer, while John Boehner, representing those Republicans, called the White House irrational. So a slight setback there has slightly put the markets on edge. Meanwhile, in Asia, you can see broadly that the Nikkei and the Hang Seng have been following on in the same direction. The Shanghai Composite has, in the last few minutes, broken into positive territory. And actually, the Kospi, you can see that, has been breaking that trend all morning. That is in positive territory and remains so after the election of Conservative candidate Park Geun-hye. Now, she, of course, is the first female leader of South Korea. Earlier, I asked our Seoul correspondent, Andrew Salmon, about Park's policies on the Chaebol. Those are family-owned conglomerates that make up a large percentage of South Korea's economy.
The Samsungs, the Hyundais, the LGs, the SKs, these firms have been very much a talking point during the election. We've got to remember that these companies were incubated during the period of rapid growth under Park Geun-hye's father, Park Chung-hee, and she's decided pretty much to leave well alone. However, her opponent had been arguing for major reforms. These firms, although they're tremendously successful abroad, have got a darker side at home. They're seen as abusive of their power, they're abusive of their vendors, they're muscling small companies out of different sectors of the economy, and so on. So the opponent, Moon Jae-in, had been arguing for pretty strong measures. He would wish to make illegal cross-shareholdings, which is the process by which the chairman of these companies can control their dozens or scores of affiliates by having shareholdings across their business group, but without necessarily holding a controlling stake in any of these companies. Park Geun-hye, however, has said that she will not make that illegal. She will prevent future cross-shareholdings and has asked for stronger application of the law towards them in the future. So a much softer stance than Moon Jae-in's.
Now, we've been following the visit of French President François Hollande to Algeria, his first state visit there to France's former colony. Melissa Bell, who's on the ground and following this visit, was telling us a little earlier on in the show about the business angle to this and one of the Renault plants which is going to be built in the country. Luke Schregel has more details on this.
Out with the old and in with the new. Empty buildings and disused warehouses in Algeria's second largest city are to make way for a new Renault factory. An initial production level of 25,000 vehicles will mean plenty of new local jobs and a boon for a firm that's long had a presence in Algeria.
It'll reinforce the historic ties that already exist between Renault and Algeria. For Renault, it's one of the main global markets. Today, we're the uncontested leader with about 27% of the market for several years now. It represents a little over 110,000 seats. It's Renault's sixth largest global market.
Much of the factory's output will go to producing vehicles for the local market. Rebranded variants initially developed for Renault subsidiary Dacia in Eastern Europe. With the Algerian market expanding rapidly by 30% in just the last year, it's a tempting target for an automaker seeking to protect itself from a slump in European sales. And it may just be easier than some, given many Algerians' fond memories of the firm.
Before, all my cars were Renaults. Firstly, because they were French cars, and then because they were Renault.
Rival Peugeot's determined not to be left behind, though. Less globally diversified than Renault, it's still number 2 in the Algerian market.
Hey, staying with the car industry, after 4 years, the U.S. government is finally getting out of the industry.
Yeah, of course, you may well remember the auto bailout has been a massive fixture of the political landscape in the US after the government bailed out General Motors. Now GM is planning to buy back government stock. It's unclear, of course, until the sale takes place exactly what the price will be for those shares, but it's looking likely that the government is going to make a loss, basically, on this investment. Originally, they put in $50 billion, and they're probably going to be around $12 billion down when they sell off those shares. But, of course, you could argue that's not a bad price to pay to save the US car industry. And, of course, only last week, the US sold off its stock in AIG, the insurer, and on that, they made a $23 billion profit.
Well, I'm quite surprised about this next story. Galeries Lafayette and Printemps, the two titans of Parisian Christmas shopping, are set to maybe join up. This is surprising from a customer's point of view because the two buildings are just side by side.
They are
they're
literally, aren't they? Next door on the same street, and they've been competitors for a century already. So the idea of them joining up is quite surprising. But Galeries Lafayette is reportedly interested in buying its older rival for around 1.6 billion euros. In fact, Galeries Lafayette, the company, recently sold its 50% stake in a supermarket chain here in France called Monoprix. And they've got around 1.2 billion euros burning a hole in their pocket. So they're keen to look for something else to invest in, and Printemps could be it. But competition regulators might not be so keen on it because, like you say, they have been big competitors, they're based on the same street, and they are at the heart of Paris retail.
Big Will Edwards with the business news. Thank you very much. Stuart Norville is back with World News at the top of the hour. Bye-bye.